Story 1. When I was 12, my mother informed me we were going to see my Uncle Brad, whether I liked it or not. Even though he had molested me when I was 4, she said that it had happened a long time ago and that I needed to get over it. Story 2. I found out that my son and daughter have different biological fathers, neither of whom is me. My son's father is my best friend and my little sister's husband. It's been a tough time. Story 3. New Year's Eve 2016. My girlfriend, brother, and I were hanging out, getting ready to host a party. We went out and got food and drinks. While we were waiting for people to arrive, I decided to relax on the hammocks in the courtyard of my apartment building. Both of them followed me outside. There were 2 oversized hammocks, so I expected my girlfriend to get in mine with me. Instead, she got into my brother's hammock with him. This annoyed me a bit, especially since she didn't know him very well. I was not okay with that. Anyway, I brushed it off and decided to talk to her about it after the party. Our friends showed up and we drank and hung out. Fast forward to the end of the party. It was getting late and our friends started going home. It was just my brother, my girlfriend, and me still in the apartment. Suddenly, I started to feel really tired and loopy, which was strange because I had only had a couple of drinks. I told my girlfriend that I was going to lie down because I didn't feel too good. I remember her saying she was going to have another drink and then come to bed. I stumbled to my room and fell asleep for a while. Not sure how long, but definitely less than an hour. I woke up extremely groggy, my room spinning. I was curious where my girlfriend was, so I went out into the living room, and she was on my brother's lap making out with him. I told them both to leave my apartment and passed out in my bedroom. It wasn't until later that I connected the dots. The first time I brought my girlfriend home, I passed out similarly after only a couple of drinks. I used to joke with her about how she roofied me on our first date, which she, of course, did not find funny. After that incident, I became fairly certain that she drugged me and tried to sleep with my brother. I broke up with her when I woke up the next morning, and I haven't talked to my brother in years. My brother and I grew up together. We were only 1 year apart, completely inseparable until that point. It still haunts me a little to this day. Story 4. My son's lifelong primary care physician ignored a scan faxed to her from a radiologist at the emergency room in 2018, which showed a tumor on his liver and even included measurements. She did not inform us or order follow-up testing. He passed away this past October from late-stage liver cancer, which the doctors at the Children's Hospital were surprised to discover. This occurred 2 weeks after his 16th birthday. Story 5. This may sound trivial, but when my father gave me $60 for my birthday when I was 7 or 8, I felt very rich at the time because I had not grown up with an allowance and rarely received gifts. I wanted to buy a $30 video game and save the rest, but it was rated mature, so he had to purchase it for me. When he did, he took back the $30 and I asked for it back. He told me in a stern voice, "You received your gift with the money I gave you. I will take back the rest that you do not use." I am now 35 and still recall this as if it happened recently. It affected me deeply how let down I felt by my own father. He passed away over 10 years ago and did not leave anything for us, which I totally expected. Story 6. My ex-wife was unfaithful to me. I was unaware she had an affair while we were engaged. A good friend of ours knew, but neither of them informed me. I did not know she cheated on me multiple times during our 16-year marriage until I discovered her latest affair in October 2005, which led to our divorce. I learned about her other affairs during the divorce proceedings. We did not have a real marriage. She was unfaithful while we were engaged. She understood our marriage was destined to fail before we exchanged our wedding vows. She was never fully committed to our relationship like I was. My entire marriage was a deception. Story 7. I had been talking to a girl I had been friends with for more than 10 years. We had been flirting a lot, and she convinced me to send some pictures I normally would never send. Then she immediately blackmailed me for $800. Story 8. My mom, with whom I was incredibly close throughout my life, called me inappropriate names when I was sexually assaulted at 14 years old. For anyone wondering about my relationship with my mother afterward, every time we were in a room together, It felt like I was walking on eggshells. The tension in the room was palpable. However, that was years ago. My mother passed away in 2022 during my senior year of high school. I am now 20 years old, living 1,800 miles away from home with my fiancée, and I couldn't be happier. Story 9. My ex-boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend, who he claimed he couldn't stand at all. He said he didn't want kids, and now they are married with 3 children. My best friend was constantly trying to convince me to break up with him, and even did so on the day I found out they were involved behind my back. Story 10. A coworker claimed one of my procedures, which saved the company around $1 million a month, as his own. Luckily, all the lab notebooks were clearly in my handwriting, and all the data was under my login, but that one hurt. Story 11. My ex-girlfriend accused me of being physically and emotionally abusive while we were together. She isolated me from all my friends when we broke up because I wouldn't take her back, and now I have lost touch with those friends. This just shows that nothing is permanent. Everything is temporary. Story 12. I took in a friend who had a heroin addiction and was in recovery. I supported her financially. She tried to turn me against my husband, stole thousands of dollars from us, and took my engagement and wedding rings. I was the first woman in my family to have an engagement ring and to get married because I wanted to, rather than out of necessity. My engagement ring had great significance to me, and losing it was devastating. She was involved in sex work for drugs, and I had a man show up at my house months later trying to proposition me. Thankfully, a violent man who wouldn't take no for an answer didn't arrive. Another man showed up looking for her because he was infatuated with her. We pressed charges. She never spent any time in jail despite it being a felony charge, which frustrates me whenever I think about it. Story 13. Finding out my boyfriend was living a full-blown double life was shocking. I dated a complete stranger who doesn't actually exist. This was definitely the biggest and craziest betrayal I've experienced. Story 14. It's partly my own fault. My ex-wife was unfaithful. I kept forgiving her because we had children together. After 23 years of marriage and 5 children, she left and moved in with someone who did not contribute. I raised the children myself. The biggest betrayal wasn't her leaving me. It was her lack of interest in the lives of our kids. My daughters were in high school, and my 2 youngest sons were 7 and 9. They needed a mother. Story 15. After dedicating my life to figure skating, my coach abandoned me during the lowest time of my life. She watched and encouraged me to push myself for years, and when my body started to break down, she left. She told me I didn't want it badly enough, as if I hadn't neglected every other aspect of my life to dedicate myself completely to becoming the best in the world. I wasn't even close. Watching her walk out on me so easily, after everything we had been through, felt like betrayal. Story 16. I made the mistake of letting my best friend talk me into working for him. It went well for over a year, but one day he ordered me to unpack, dismantle, and completely rebuild a set of prototypes I had spent the last 3 weeks perfecting, which were already on the outgoing shipping dock. He said he had an idea that there might be something wrong with them. I protested, pointing out that we had both agreed everything had been thoroughly tested and was ready to ship. He reluctantly agreed, and I thought that was that. A little while later, I walked into the engineering lab and found the shipping carton open and the prototypes on the test bench, completely disassembled. He said, "I guess they were okay after all." I was furious. It was a huge personal insult. It showed a real lack of trust in my technical abilities and professional integrity, and how far off his judgment had gone. I walked to my cube, gathered my things, and left. I never went back. I liked that job but was too angry to work for him any longer. I've seen him socially a few times since, but things just aren't the same. He apologized, but there's a distance there that I can't seem to overcome. This whole situation has ruined a 23-year friendship. Story 17. I got a good job for my age when I was a senior in high school. My mother was on a very poor combination of medication and lived in a constant state of anxiety. She took my first year's income, minus what I had to spend on bills, and continued to take from me for about 8 months until I finally worked up the courage to stop it. I later found out that she had money the entire time. She just didn't want to spend her own, so she spent mine instead. Story 18. I supported him in getting promoted and even financially, to the point of paying for his meals and transportation which he could not afford. Suddenly, I faced financial challenges as I had to help with my family's medical expenses. A week after I revealed my financial struggles to him, he left me because he viewed me as immature. Story 19. Trigger warning. Child abuse, drug abuse. When I was a young child, my parents were heavily addicted to meth in a small, remote town in North Carolina. My sister and I grew up in the back of an old white Toyota. Red vinyl seats were scattered with cigarette burn holes. It was less than ideal, but it was my normal, and I didn't know any other life. My parents would often have my baby sister and me lay on the floorboards under a blanket while they conducted their dealings in shady areas and found a rest stop to use drugs, all while we tried to find any semblance of sleep. I vividly remember belt buckles digging into my side, keeping me up at night before being dropped off at school without any food or basic hygiene needs being met. I hated being the smelly kid. Something you never forget. Fast forward to the 3rd grade. We had a single wide trailer to call home. I was so happy to have a room and a place to sleep, even if running water was still rare and electricity was even less available. I enjoyed my cold showers, making sure to scrub thoroughly. Sadly, though, my parents still had problems and were often not around, leaving me to take care of my sister most of the time. After 5 days without our parents, and me not having attended school since no one could watch my sister, we had no food in the house, and I had to figure something out. So I went over to my neighbor's trailer as a last resort. I had seen her, a tall, blonde woman in her mid-20s, constantly caring for her garden and waving occasionally when I played outside. She wore long-sleeve shirts and long skirts, and her hair was always in a bun. She gladly fed us what she could when she could and taught us about God. She explained how she would attend Pentecostal and apostolic services 4 times a week at different churches in the area, sharing messages of love and the positive aspects of religion, even for the most scraggly children. I was sold. After a year or so, my sister and I went with her to nearly every service, and I became very invested in the religion. My sister was more interested in the cookies and refreshments. That was when she started having me bathe with her. To spare everyone the gross and gory details that ensued for another year before my sister and I went into foster care, she turned out to be manipulative. She used God to scare me into doing things no child should do, and when I finally summoned the courage to break up with my childhood abuser, she broke down crying, saying that God would punish both of us for what we had done. She told me God would never let me be a singer. She quite literally took my voice. After years of shame, binge drinking, and therapy, I am in a much better place. I have grown past the trauma and can finally tell my own story without guilt or resentment. I'm working towards my degree in psychiatry and want to become a child psychologist one day, so no child can ever feel as though they don't have a voice again. I also have a pop album soon to be released. I am a strong, happy person in a healthy and loving relationship. I no longer wake up from night terrors feeling haunted by her memories. People can heal. If you need anything, I know therapy is out of reach for many, but there are programs available. You all can do this, and I'm rooting for you. Story 20. My best friend for 16 years was my best man at my first wedding. He is now dating my ex-wife. I haven't spoken to him since. Story 21. An older relative of my husband's asked if we could hire his granddaughter for the summer, since she had just graduated high school and needed money for college. We owned a farm together, so there is always something to do. I said yes, of course we can find her something. 2 months later, I figured out my husband was having an affair with her. She was barely 19. He was 38. We have children together. Now I'm divorced because I left my husband for seducing his teenage cousin. Adding to the situation, his Catholic family pressed me for months to forgive and not leave. 2 years later, I still can't believe it. No good deed goes unpunished. Story 22. A coworker became my best friend, and we co-ran a small business together for a difficult but mostly absentee owner for 7 years. Employees admired our friendship and the way we managed the business, often suggesting that we should team up and buy it. We would have wistful what-if conversations, but nothing substantial. One day, I arrived at work, and she informed me that the owner had approached her months ago about selling the business. She matter-of-factly told me she was going through with it and that after reviewing the financial statements, there's no room for a partner. She was so quick and definitive in her statement. I was still reeling from the initial shock, but that remark reverberated in my mind for months. The betrayal and destruction of what had been the most important friendship in my adult life led me into a deep depression for 6 to 8 months. I woke up every morning with piercing dread in my chest and went to sleep each night thinking it would be a relief not to wake up. Thankfully, I have crawled my way out of that dark place, and I am grateful for the perspective. I now have much more compassion for people caught in the grips of depression. Story 23. I confided in a good friend and coworker about how much I disliked my job and thought our manager was incompetent. She took screenshots of our conversation and sent them to human resources. I didn't get fired, but I lost a promotion opportunity and faced significant backlash from my management team, which made my life difficult. They tried everything to get me to quit, but I didn't give in. The girl I confided in was promoted to a managerial role within 2 months and spoke poorly of me at every opportunity. It's been almost 10 years since then, but it ultimately worked out for me. I left that unsatisfactory job and city for a significant upgrade in both. I'm thriving now, both personally and professionally. The girl who reported me to human resources got fired not long after I left. She tried to enter the real estate business but was unsuccessful. She recently texted me nearly 10 years later to try and sell me insurance. I didn't respond. I'm not a vengeful person, but that felt good. Story 24. Not me, but my nephew. He is the biggest mama's boy in the world, currently 2.5 years old. This took place just before his 2nd birthday. My cousin, who lives in another country, was visiting so everyone could meet her new baby. We were all at a big family barbecue, and my nephew was having a blast running around and playing when he turned around just as his mom started holding my cousin's baby. I have never seen such a hurt and betrayed look on his face in my life. He was completely inconsolable for nearly a week. He was both sad and hilarious at the same time. At least he got his first huge betrayal out of his system so early in life that he won't remember it when he's older. Story 25. When I was 15 or 16, an old best friend of mine, who was 18, contacted me and said she would be in town and wanted to hang out. She had always been very jealous of me, especially since I was dating a guy she had a crush on in the past, although I was unaware of this when I began seeing him. However, she didn't seem to care. One day, her 2 male friends, who were in their 20s, drove her to pick me up from his house. During the ride, they humiliated and controlled me, and one of them attempted to assault me. They pressured me into playing a game in which the last person to punch the roof of the car had to remove a piece of clothing. My friend, sitting beside me in the back seat, tried to physically take my clothes off when I lost. I ended up without a bra or shirt, and they wouldn't allow me to put my clothes back on. They hid my clothes in the front of the car. Here I was, a minor, sitting with adults, and they were commenting on my body the entire time. Later that day, we ended up at a hotel that I paid for, to drink and smoke. Once there, they took my phone and hid it, claiming they didn't want my boyfriend to distract me. Soon after we arrived, one of the guys left for a bit, leaving me with my friend and her older male friend, who was at least 25, over 6 feet tall, and very heavy-set. My friend was occupied with something on her laptop while this guy forced me onto the bed, climbing on top of me and pinning my arms down. He began kissing me and pulling my clothes off. I told him to stop and struggled, but he was so large that I couldn't move at all. He insisted I had to play by the rules and that no one had to know. Fortunately, when the other guy knocked on the door, he stopped. I had to beg them to return my phone so I could call my mother, actually, my boyfriend, and I made up an excuse I can't even remember. He came and picked me up, and when I told him what happened, the only thing he seemed upset about was that I smoked cannabis. Turned out he was not a good person either. To this day, I believe she planned all of this with her friends. Our friendship was never perfect. Mostly, that was due to her insecurities about her looks and her jealousy of me. Whenever I dated a guy, she would treat me poorly and insult me. I wish I had done something about it, but I was too scared to tell anyone. I was at a hotel with older men drinking alcohol and smoking cannabis. The only person who knew was my boyfriend at the time, who didn't take action either. Story 26. My best friend stopped answering my calls and told me I was boring when I had a 4-week-old baby and postpartum psychosis. Then, she called me 6 months later to say she missed me but messaged me the next morning to say it was a mistake and that she needed more time apart. She never called me again. She was my children's only godparent. Story 27. I went through a breakup, and my mother laughed at me. That was years ago, and I still have not properly recovered from the emotional damage. Story 28. Throughout my childhood, I was told that if I kept my head down, did well in school, and secured a good job, I would have a comfortable middle-class life with a modest 4-bedroom house, a car, a spouse, and children. I hold a law degree and work as an experienced trial attorney, while my wife also works, yet we still struggle to make ends meet. It was all a lie. They adjust the rungs of the ladder as you climb it. Story 29. It may be disappointing, but my bank pre-approved me for a mortgage. I placed a bid for a house, it was accepted, and when I went to the bank for the mortgage, they declined it. I could have had my own house for a little over $200,000 if they had approved it, but instead, I have been living in an apartment for the last 6 years. Story 30. My mom is difficult and refuses help. I grew up living with my grandparents and supported them both financially and emotionally throughout my life. 6 weeks before my grandpa passed away, he kept asking for my mom, who had not spoken to her parents for 10 years over something trivial. I called her workplace and insisted she come see him. I believe she sensed my desperation or anger and actually came. He passed away from kidney failure on March 30th, 2019, in hospice. I was not there to witness it, but it broke my heart. My friends began to text me, urging me to check Facebook. I was confused about what was happening. My mom posted on her Facebook account that I had murdered my grandfather. She felt the care facility I arranged for him was inadequate and blamed it for his death. Story 31. When we discovered that our son, a realtor, lied to us and deliberately deceived us about the sale of his childhood home, we were devastated. Story 32. I was about 8 years old and heading to see my dad with my grandparents. On the way, we stopped at a hotel near the beach. Before we packed up and left the next day, my grandmother took us to play at the beach. My grandfather was in charge of packing everything and loading it into the van. It was finally time to go, so we cleaned up, hopped in the van, and got back on the road. Before we left, I asked my grandfather if he had grabbed my stuffed Theodore. He said yes, of course, but it was packed away and we would get it out once we arrived at my dad's. After driving a few more hours, we arrived, unloaded the car, and I opened my bags looking for my stuffed best friend only to find he was gone. I was upset, and my grandfather was indifferent, saying sorry. Needless to say, he instantly became my 4th favorite grandparent. As bad as this was, it wasn't the biggest betrayal. That came next. My dad said not to worry, he would just get me a new one. 2 weeks went by with no replacement. My sister and I flew home with my dad promising he would get one and mail it to me. Guess what never showed up? At that point, I realized I could trust no one in this world. I finally broke down and bought one last year after giving him over 35 years to keep his promise. Story 33. He cheated on me with the lifeguard at his new job for over 3 months. He made me come to the beach while she was there. He treated me poorly for weeks, keeping me anxious and on edge with vague comments and strange questions in social situations or when under the influence, so I couldn't properly understand what was going on. A terrible person. I only found out about the cheating afterward. He ended up letting someone drown at work because he was irresponsible. He lost his license, and I believe the criminal charges still haunt him because the person who died came from a wealthy family of lawyers. That's absolute karma. I'm genuinely happy about that. When we randomly met, he expected me to feel pity for him. I told him to leave me alone. Story 34. When I was 29, my brother told me that my parents used a sperm donor to have me, and that changed my whole life. Everyone in my life knew except me, and they all wanted me to know, but my mom made them promise never to tell me. So, it has been pretty rough between my mom and me since I found out. Story 35. My biggest betrayal was convincing myself that I mattered less. Many of us were wronged by people we loved, and we never deserved that. I was justifiably mad at former friends, former loves, and others for a while. But nothing hurts more than realizing I let myself believe that I deserved to give, change, support, and empathize to a fault when all I was getting was the bare minimum in return. Story 36. I took too much insulin and collapsed on the floor. I saw my ex look down at me and then walk away. He left me for dead and later told me that he thought I was ignoring him. Story 37. My husband pleaded with me for 5 years to give him a child, and I finally did. The pregnancy was challenging, but I managed to get through it. When our son was 3, we separated due to his severe psychological abuse and neglect in our marriage. He immediately became involved with a young girl from the Czech Republic, and together they plotted to kidnap my son. That was 7 years ago. She has replaced me as his mother, and he does not remember me. Since the day he was taken, I have spent every moment and every penny I can acquire trying to get my son back. However, we live in a country known for corruption, and my husband has been paying judges, government officials, and even my own lawyers to delay the case. The same situation applies to the divorce. He locked me out of our shared accounts the day he took my baby, so if the divorce were to go through, he would, in theory, have to pay me money, but he wants all of our assets in custody of our child. I do not know what my son looks like, what he enjoys eating or watching, what kind of education he is receiving, or even what his speaking voice sounds like. My son believes I abandoned him because that is what they told him. Story 38. My mother went back to my father after he was imprisoned for sexually abusing me from the age of 2 until I was 13. I finally told my best friend at school, who informed the teacher, leading to the headmistress calling the police immediately. As soon as he was released from prison, my mother allowed him to return home because she wanted the boys to have a father. The boys are my 13-year-old and 9-year-old brothers. I had to go home and see my father there. He would leave when I got home, but I started living on the streets and staying in squats instead of going home. Then I began drinking alcohol, being sexually promiscuous, self-harming, and using heroin. It spiraled from there. To this day, I haven't spoken to my mother about it because I don't know how to. I would lose my composure with her. I love her, but I do not forgive her. It is especially difficult because when I had my first child, I looked at him and thought, I will do anything to protect you. I would never allow a man to live if he harmed him, let alone return to the man who did. It is unimaginable to me to be intimate with someone who raped your daughter. I cannot comprehend it. Story 39. Does my boyfriend sleeping with my brother count? Or the fact that my boyfriend died due to a combination of drugs and alcohol before I had a chance to confront him? Or that no matter how hard I try, very little seems to go my way? Story 40. My ex-wife left me 3 days after obtaining her green card for a business client with whom she was having an affair. Story 41. My father often said that my kindness would be my downfall. He was the one who took advantage of it. Story 42. I was dating a guy who started making out with another girl right in front of me. I was too busy to notice until I saw him. I didn't make a scene and pretended like nothing happened for the rest of the night while we were out with friends. Once we were alone, I confronted him, asked him to leave my place and moved on. However, he didn't move on. He kept stalking me for years. My first boyfriend, when I was 16, also cheated on me with my best friend at the time. I confronted him and asked him to leave my house as well. I guess I know how to pick them, right? Story 43. I was in this friend group for a while and was still in it when I came out as a lesbian. One of the members was extremely homophobic towards me, driving me out of the group. She started to spread rumors about me, and I was harassed and abused for years. It seemed to die down after a while, but then I heard that she is coming to my school and joining the sports team I am currently on. I am worried, and it broke my heart at the time. I seriously cannot go through that again. Story 44. Mine is not romantic. My best friend was more like my brother. Seriously, I had framed pictures of him in the house. We had been best friends since childhood. He was there at my children's births and was going to be the godfather if something happened to my husband and me. We worked together in all aspects of our lives. I can't articulate how close we all were. Then, he got a girlfriend and cut us out almost immediately. He abandoned us and ceased all contact. My children cried and mourned him, asking what they did wrong. He also distanced himself from every other person in his life, including his family members, so it was not isolated to us. Although we aren't in contact, last I knew, she had pretty much destroyed his life. He lost his home and has nothing for himself. He isn't even allowed to play video games or go to concerts. Is it an abusive relationship? Maybe, but at some point he made a choice. It happened so quickly. He threw away our relationship over a girl he didn't even know for a month. I would have never seen this coming in a million years. Permanently changed my view of people. I feel so betrayed. Story 45. I broke my jaw during an altercation where I was nearly beaten to death. I had to undergo surgery and my jaw was wired shut for 9 weeks. He is still mentally ill even though he was sent to prison. I believe the larger betrayal was the initial one. Story 46. I broke up with my boyfriend of 6 years. He was controlling and the relationship had ended years before. A friend of mine told me he loved me the next day, and we got together. The worship pastor of our church, whom I had known for over 15 years, I was a bridesmaid at his wedding when he was not a pastor, told us we had to wait 6 months to date each other, and he and his family could not talk to me at all during that time. We ignored him as we were aware we were two consenting adults, and he was overstepping. As a result, he had us removed from the church, and we lost all the friendships we thought we had there. 7 years later, we're still in and out of therapy over it. Story 47. My mother stayed married to my stepfather after I told her he was abusing me. They were married until I was 18, and he abused me when I was 6 or 7 years old. Story 48. My ex of 6 years cheated on me with my 2 closest friends 3 days after he accepted my marriage proposal. He told me the next day. Stupidly, I tried to make it work. Even more foolishly, he wanted me to remain friends with those 2 individuals. 6 months later, we sold our house and bought a new one to distance ourselves from them, and he broke up with me 3 days later. That was 5 years ago. In my defense, I knew these were poor decisions at the time, but I needed to feel that I had tried everything. I haven't spoken to them since I moved out. If I distrust, that's on me. I don't want to be that person. If he lies and cheats, that's on him. Story 49. My ex-best friend's boyfriend assaulted me. She believed me but chose not to. Despite him confirming I was telling the truth, she decided to not believe me. I later discovered he had assaulted and manipulated her childhood best friend a couple of years before, which led to that friend attempting suicide. She had completely cut that woman out of her life and lied to me about what happened. She claimed that the woman tried to seduce her boyfriend, so she cut her off. She could have saved me so much pain and suffering but chose her own dysfunction instead. Story 50. A friend started dating an ex of mine a month after my breakup with her. They didn't last more than a few weeks, but the friendship was over. Story 51. My best friend of 20 years held my leg when I gave birth to my son. She is now married to his father and has children of her own. They tried to gain full custody of our child, but ended up with a restraining order against them until he turns 18. Story 52. My ex-husband canceled the trip we had planned for our 10th anniversary. Since we first got married, we had planned to take a couple's vacation to a beach resort, stay in the honeymoon suite, and celebrate our 10 years together. However, 10 days before departure, when I went to confirm our reservations, I was informed that he had already received a refund for the entire $10,000 over a month earlier. To this day, I still do not know where the money went. Story 53. Reading all of this makes me feel immensely sad about the trauma you have all experienced. It also makes me feel less alone in my own. Story 54. A longtime friend of mine made a post about how she desperately needed a new start, far away from upstate New York. She asked if anyone would be willing to drive her as far as possible to reach her grandma in Florida. I immediately offered to help, not caring that she couldn't compensate me. I drove us 7 or 8 hours into the early morning. I got us a hotel room to rest before leaving again, only to be woken up by her excitedly telling me that her grandma had paid for a flight for her to complete the journey. We had a teary goodbye, but she promised it wouldn't be the last time we saw each other. A few hours later, I discovered she had taken my credit card out of my wallet while I was asleep, purchased herself a plane ticket, and fabricated the entire story. She responded to my messages expressing my disappointment, simply saying sorry and nothing more. I later found out that she had become a heroin addict, which she apologized for to several people she had taken advantage of. 8 years later, she is a born-again Christian, and I still haven't received so much as an apology. I am not holding my breath on that one. Story 55. In 5th grade, a dodgeball was thrown at my face by one of my friends while the others laughed at me and then left without me. Story 56. When I was 7 years old, I won Student of the Month at school. You received a certificate at an assembly, had your picture taken, and the best part was going to Dairy Queen with your teacher for lunch. It was always a big deal. I loved my 2nd grade teacher, but the month I won, she was out on maternity leave, so another staff member took me. She was a miserable person who worked in the office and seemed to dislike children. We arrived at Dairy Queen, and being the shy kid I was, I told her my order while she went to get it. What came was not what I ordered. I didn't say anything and ate it quietly. I had to go to the bathroom, and this lady impatiently said that if I wasn't out in 2 minutes, she would leave. Well, I didn't make it in 2 minutes and came out to find her gone. She fully left a 7-year-old child at Dairy Queen to teach me a lesson. She drove back around to me crying and hiding under a picnic table outside. She got angry, told me to get in, and to stop being a baby. Back in class, my friends noticed I had been crying and asked the substitute if I could call my mom. She didn't allow me to, so for the rest of the day, I felt hurt and scared. The assembly was in the afternoon, and I was actually excited to receive my certificate and shake the principal's hand, then have my picture posted by the office. However, I saw the office lady standing by the gym door and started crying again out of embarrassment, asking to go to the bathroom. I hid in the bathroom during the assembly. I felt so ashamed when I heard my dad call my name. He and my mom had come to watch me receive the certificate. Crying even harder now, I let him carry me out of school and into my mom's car. To further twist the knife, the school didn't do anything about it. It was played off like I chose to skip the assembly and that I had not behaved appropriately at Dairy Queen. It took me a long time to even talk to adults who weren't my parents after that. I had never felt so betrayed by someone who was not only supposed to be looking after me, but also facilitating a special treat for my achievement. Later in life, I found the certificate. My mom had collected it and put it in a scrapbook of things I had done. She had written a little note saying, "Student of the month of March, student of our hearts every month." I was in my 20s then, but it hurt a lot knowing that this woman robbed me of what should have been a very happy memory for my family. I have been cheated on and betrayed at work, but in my nearly 40 years on Earth, the level of trust and excitement this woman destroyed for me is my biggest betrayal. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.